things like that happen. I mean, it's you could argue that it was, maybe a poor schedule, and maybe they could schedule him on a bigger court. Yes, but again, she's Alex Eala. That's been a talk, and which is understandable. There's some players coming from respective countries, like she's coming from Philippines, which is now a big deal. She's been the biggest ever, tennis player from that country, which is a big country, and there's a big...
The silence is over, and when Novak Djokovic speaks, the tennis world listens. He has reportedly addressed the situation surrounding Alex Eala at the Australian Open, and according to the narrative, he didn't hold back. Alex, the Filipino tennis sensation and pride of her nation, suffered a first-round exit in Melbourne, but the conversation quickly shifted from her performance to something bigger: tournament management and court assignment. Let's break this down. Alex entered the Australian Open carrying serious expectations. She isn't just another rising player. She is widely regarded as the most accomplished tennis player the Philippines has ever produced. At just 20 years old, she has broken rankings barriers, reached major milestones, and elevated Filipino tennis onto the global stage. That kind of rise naturally brings visibility, and visibility usually brings bigger stages. But instead of being placed on one of the tournament's show courts, she was reportedly assigned to a smaller outside court. In Grand Slam tournaments, court assignments matter. They influence atmosphere, crowd energy, media exposure, and sometimes even match conditions. While scheduling decisions are often based on rankings, draw balance, broadcasting priorities, and ticket demand, they can still spark debate, especially when a fast-rising star is involved. According to the narrative circulating online, Djokovic felt that Alex deserved more respect and recognition in that moment. The suggestion being made is that management decisions may have indirectly impacted the environment surrounding her match. Now, it's important to keep perspective. The Australian Open is organized by Tennis Australia, and women's matches fall under the broader coordination of tournament organizers in collaboration with the WTA Tour, not solely the WTA acting independently. Court placement decisions are typically logistical rather than personal. Still, the broader point resonates. Alex Eala represents more than herself. She represents a growing tennis nation. She represents millions of Filipino fans. And with her rapid rise, breaking into the top 40 and competing deep in WTA 1000 events, expectations around how she is positioned on the sport's biggest stages are naturally increasing. Was the smaller court the reason for her loss? That's difficult to claim definitively. Tennis matches are decided by performance, tactics, and execution. But visibility, respect, and presentation absolutely shape the narrative around an athlete. And that's why this story is getting attention. Because when a 24-time Grand Slam champion like Novak Djokovic comments on fairness, opportunity, or respect in the sport, people listen. The bigger conversation isn't about one match. It's about recognition. It's about emerging stars getting the platform that matches their impact. And if Alex Eala continues her upward trajectory, moments like this may soon become irrelevant, because the biggest courts in the world will have no choice but to feature her front and center. Now, some people will say, it's just a court assignment. How much can that really matter? But anyone who has competed, or even closely followed, professional tennis knows it matters. A lot. The size of the court changes the atmosphere. The bigger stadiums amplify sound. The energy hits differently. Lighting setups vary. Wind patterns shift. Even the visual depth perception can feel different in a large arena compared to an outside court. In a Grand Slam environment like the Australian Open, those details aren't small. They're part of the competitive equation. When you're dealing with a young player under pressure, someone like Alex Eala, every marginal factor can influence rhythm, focus, and momentum. Big courts often bring bigger crowds, and for a player backed by passionate supporters, that atmosphere can provide an emotional lift. Now, the narrative being pushed by some fans is that this wasn't just a one-off issue, that it reflects a broader pattern of tough breaks or questionable moments surrounding Alex during her WTA journey. One example frequently brought up is a controversial line call during the Australian Open qualifiers. In the middle of a crucial rally, Alex struck a shot that appeared, to spectators, clearly inside the line. From certain angles, the mark looked visible. The trajectory seemed clean, but the call came out. Moments like that are brutal in tennis. There's no teammate to lean on, no timeout to reset the system. One call can swing momentum, especially in a tight first set. That said, it's important to maintain perspective. At major tournaments like the Australian Open, electronic line calling systems are typically used to minimize human error. While fans and players may disagree with specific calls, the systems are designed to be objective. Disputed points are part of tennis, even at the highest level. Frustrating? Absolutely. Unfair by design? That's much harder to prove. High-level tennis is full of razor-thin margins. A single point can change a set. A single set can change a match. And in early rounds, especially qualifying, those margins feel even sharper. Clear as this, Alex Eala's rise has put her under a brighter spotlight. With more visibility comes more scrutiny, from fans, media, and even other players. The bigger conversation isn't about one court assignment or one line call. It's about expectations. When a player becomes a symbol of national pride and a rapidly rising force on tour, every detail feels magnified. And that's what happens when you're no longer just a promising talent. You're becoming a name people expect to see on the biggest stages.
Alex a little bit annoyed now. That's the second time that has happened with that same linesman.
Now, that moment with the replayed point, that's where emotions really started to rise. In tennis, procedure matters. When there's a disputed call, there are protocols. Either the ball is ruled in, or it's ruled out. Sometimes electronic systems are consulted. Sometimes umpires overrule. But when a point gets replayed, it usually happens under very specific circumstances, interference, hindrance, or uncertainty that can't be resolved. To fans watching, it didn't feel routine. It felt disruptive. From the outside, it looked like Alex had won the point cleanly. The mark appeared visible. The rally had ended. And then, instead of a simple decision, the point was replayed. That's the kind of moment that can shake a player. Momentum in tennis is fragile. One interruption can change rhythm, timing, and emotional flow. But here's what stood out. Alex Eala didn't explode. She didn't unravel. She walked to the chair umpire. Calm, controlled, firm. She made her case. She stood her ground. Not with chaos, but with clarity. That's maturity. And despite that disruption, she didn't let it derail her. She regrouped, refocused, and she won the match. Not only that, she powered through the qualifiers at the Australian Open and made it all the way to the final round. That's resilience. Now, let's address the other moment you mentioned, her match against Iga Swiatek. For context, Swiatek isn't just any opponent. She's a multiple Grand Slam champion, a former world number one of the most dominant forces in women's tennis over the past few years. For a young player like Alex to even compete evenly in stretches against someone of that caliber is impressive. And by many accounts, she was doing more than competing. She was holding her own, matching rallies, building momentum, playing fearless tennis. Then came an interruption involving equipment in her bag. Now, in professional tennis, officials are allowed to check equipment if there are concerns about rule compliance, whether it's coaching devices, electronics, or other prohibited items. Those checks can happen mid-match. They are part of tournament regulation, but timing matters. When something like that happens during a critical stretch, when a player is gaining traction, it can feel disruptive. It can feel like momentum has been paused. What's important, though, is this. There is no verified evidence that the action was meant to embarrass or target her. Tournament officials operate under rulebooks. Whether the situation was handled perfectly or awkwardly is open to debate, but intent is much harder to assign. And that distinction matters. What can't be debated is Alex's response to adversity. Whether it's a replayed point, a scheduling debate, an equipment interruption, she keeps competing. That's the bigger pattern. Young players often get rattled by controversy. They spiral. They lose focus. But Alex has repeatedly shown that she absorbs pressure and keeps playing. That's why conversations around her feel so intense right now. Because she's no longer just a prospect. She's visible. She's relevant. She's drawing crowds. She's building a global fan base. And with that visibility comes scrutiny, fair or unfair, justified or misunderstood. If anything, these moments highlight something important. She's entering the phase of her career where every detail feels amplified. That's what happens when you start threatening the established order. And if her trajectory continues, the conversation will shift away from officiating and court assignments, and towards something much simpler. How far can she go? Because the real story isn't controversy. It's resilience under pressure. And that's what separates good players from future stars. When an official tells a player, it's confirmed, you cannot use it, in the middle of a high-stakes match, think about what that does psychologically. You're locked in. You're competing against one of the best players in the world. You're building momentum. And suddenly, the spotlight shifts away from tennis and onto you. Any interruption at that level can shake rhythm. It can disrupt focus. It can cool momentum at the worst possible time. That's not conspiracy. That's sports psychology. Elite performance is fragile. Timing matters. Now, was it intentional? There's no confirmed evidence of that. Officials operate under tournament regulations, and equipment checks are within their authority. But impact and intent are two different things. Even if something follows the rulebook, the timing and handling of it can still be questioned. And that's where Novak Djokovic enters the conversation. This isn't just any voice. This is a 24-time Grand Slam champion, a player who has spent nearly 2 decades at the very top of the sport. Someone who understands pressure, fairness, and the fine margins that define elite competition. When Djokovic comments on treatment, visibility, or management in tennis, people listen, not because he's loud, but because he's experienced everything the sport has to offer. The broader conversation isn't about one backpack check. It's not about one court assignment. It's not about one replayed point. It's about consistency. It's about whether rising stars, especially those coming from smaller tennis nations like the Philippines, feel they are being positioned and handled with the same clarity and structure as established names. Alexandra Eala represents more than herself. She represents a growing tennis community. She represents a new market. She represents millions of fans who are seeing themselves reflected on the global stage. And as her profile grows, so will scrutiny, from fans, media, and fellow players. But here's what matters most. Despite every interruption, every debate, every controversial moment, Alex keeps competing. She keeps improving. She keeps rising. That's the real story. Not controversy. Not drama. Resilience. So what do you think? Do you believe tournament management needs to be more transparent about court assignments and officiating procedures? Have you noticed moments in her matches that felt disruptive? Drop your thoughts in the comments, respectfully. Let's have a real discussion about fairness, consistency, and how the sport can continue to evolve. And if you support Alex's journey, keep watching. Because one thing is clear, she has the talent, she has the toughness, and she's only getting started. If you enjoyed this breakdown and want more in-depth tennis coverage, make sure you're subscribed, turn on notifications, and share this with fellow tennis fans. Until next time, keep loving the game, and I'll see you in the next video.